Is there a truly reality out there that humans could really know? It's an age-old battle between realists and absolutists. God is not great, how religion ruins everything. And yet it's utterly and totally ridiculous. We need to live for something beyond ourselves. In 1966, an American poet and author named Delmore Schwartz died. It was kind of a very sad death, too. He was young, he was only like in his 50s, and he basically died pretty much insane and in solitude in a hotel room in Manhattan. And he had reached at one point in the middle of the century just the height of fame, just very well-known writer and just very much accepted, and just he had reached the top. But then he slowly started to descend into mental illness, and as I said, he died alone in a flop house in Manhattan. Now, in the early part of the 20th century, the author Delmore Schwartz wrote a fabulous short story. It's called The Statues, and that's what I want to look at today because it's a very powerful story with a haunting yet very important message. The Statues begins like this. In mid-20th century Manhattan, an extraordinary, inexplicable, and terrifying event had occurred. A massive snowfall had created overnight, all through the city, these statues, a very curious design, an unquestionable design. Some of them were very human. And what's more, the snow had hardened like a rock so that the edifices couldn't be easily moved. Well, everybody poured out into the streets, awed at this amazing array of shapes. Again, it was a snowfall, and it created these statues. And he wrote, he said, hence, it was the whole day after the snowfall became an unofficial holiday. All private concerns were ignored, all official tasks absent-mindedly attended to, all other things put aside while everyone discussed, analyzed, and sought an explanation for the remarkable statues of snow. At one point, the mayor announced that the statues were going to be removed as soon as possible. Well, when he did it, his office was assaulted by telegrams and telephone calls. Don't you dare touch those statues, they said. Don't you dare to go near them. Now, among those concerned was the hero of his story. It was a 30-year-old dentist named Faber Gottschalk, who, as it said, unable to understand his passionate concern about the statues, quote, went to the mayor's office in order to insist that nothing be done to them. Now, Faber was sort of an interesting character. He was a dentist, yet he hated his work. Schwartz wrote, to seek out decay and pus, to do this day after day, to have this in the forefront of one's consciousness, these central aspects of his profession he disliked, did not get used to, and never regard with anything but aversion. And as a result of this, Faber kind of evaded anything that immediately presented itself to him. Dentistry, which basically consisted mostly of him sticking his fingers in other people's mouths, had alienated him from letting anything get too close to him, except the statues. He was so enthralled by these statues that he canceled all his appointments until further notice. And he spent the day walking up and down the city looking at the statues and just, admiring them, and he saw new and interesting shapes. He just was fascinated. In the story that evening, he went back to his apartment and he was smoking a cigar. And though he enjoyed his cigar, he was able to distinguish clearly, the story said, between the pleasure of smoking and the great happiness which had come upon him when he awakened to see these strange things below his apartment window. Well, life went on before as in New York, but not quite. For instance, though, there would be strikes and bosses and policemen, and there'd be contentions in the street, the normal stuff going on in New York. Every now and then, people would just stop what they were doing and stare at the statues. He wrote, at certain moments, everything stopped and was motionless, as at a red light on a great avenue. And in this motionless period, complete silence, people would stop and stare at the statues as when a noble man's death is regarded. Anyway, from Faber-Gottschalk, what he did was he ended up quitting his job. He closed his business, and all he did was walk through the streets of New York. Faber-Gottschalk alone, wrote Schwartz, had surrendered the being of his past life utterly, ceased to practice his profession, and went through the conscious day throughout New York in an effort to see all the statues. So the point is, he forgot everything. He was enthralled by these mysterious statues. They gave him a sense of meaning and purpose he couldn't understand. Then what happened? Schwartz writes, then a tireless and foul rain descended, and to everyone's surprise, destroyed the statues. The papers noted the incident the next morning and then no more. Then life immediately carried on as before. The same problems, the same entities, all things had returned as if they had never been there, as if they had never been interrupted to begin with. Now, Schwartz ends the story like this. A particularly brutal murder was committed in Brooklyn. The sports page carried much news about ice sports at winter resorts. A boy of 17, scion of a rich family, disappeared from home and was found later in Iceland. Faber-Gottschalk jumped or fell in front of an onrushing train, and only a few were sufficiently disturbed to keep in mind, with the help of photographs, the holy time when the statues had presented their marvelous forms everywhere in the city of New York. Now, I believe these statues were a rare metaphor, a metaphor of meaning amid meaninglessness. This Faber, he found in these mysterious and beautiful creations something that he hadn't found anywhere else in the monotony and aloofness of his existence. Really unable to articulate what it was, he was nevertheless drawn by their beauty. He saw something there. A man who spent his days putting his fingers in the dirty mouths of people finally found something beyond himself. He was looking for more meaning to life, looking for more than just what he was doing. And then what happens? What happens instantly, overnight? All it took was a rain, and it was destroyed. Everything he looked at, everything he saw was gone just like that. This story makes me think of, as humans, we really are looking for something beyond ourselves, aren't we? We're looking for hope or something beyond. What are we? We're small packets of flesh carrying around with us our own fecal matter. And that's not far from our own minds. And what are our minds but a few pounds of carbon-based, organic material that's closer in structure to a box of Kentucky Fried Chicken than it is a hard drive. What can such small self-contained packets of meat, which is us, mean in contrast to the infinity that surrounds us? To live only for yourself, to live for something no bigger than yourself when there's so much all around us. It's like being imprisoned in solitary confinement in the middle of a city, and you could feel, all you know of the city is you could feel it vibrating through the walls. So this poor guy, Faber, he reached out beyond himself, and he found something in these statues, these snow statues. He called them these sacred mysteries. He found something there that he hadn't found in anything else in his life, and they meant so much to him. And then what happened? Only to have a simple rain come out and wipe everything away, leaving only what? A few puddles behind. And I think there's a powerful message in there. It reminds me of a statement found in one of the Gospels, and it's worth thinking about. Do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and rust destroys and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. I think there's a current point there, something to think about. And as I said in the beginning, what I think makes this more haunting, the story more haunting, is that Delmore Schwartz himself, the author, he was a tormented soul who died insane and alone in some flop house in Manhattan. And you know, if there's some of the Faber-Gottschalk in him, it's no wonder that it happened. We need to live for something beyond ourselves, but make sure whatever it is, it's something that doesn't get wiped out by something as simple as a basic rain.